Welcome to The Explainer. If you're a focused learner gearing up to crush your A-level OCR geography exams, specifically Section 4A on coastal landscapes, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating case study, how human activity intentionally causes change within a coastal landscape system. Our focus? The famous Sandbanks in Dorset. So grab your notes, let's dive right in and get you that A-star understanding of exactly how and why humans are stepping in to manage this unique environment.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with an introduction to Sandbanks, Dorset. Then we'll look at the need for management, the actual coastal management strategies being used, the impacts on coastal processes, and finally, the consequences for the landscape. Let's jump in.
Section 1. Introduction to Sandbanks, Dorset.
Okay, so just consider the sheer vulnerability of this geography. It's literally a tiny, narrow spit of land separating Pool Harbor on one side from Pool Bay on the other. Because of its extreme physical location, it doesn't just manage itself, it is heavily managed by humans. And it's a total team effort. You've got the Pool Harbor Commissioners, the Pool Borough Council, and the Environment Agency all working together under something called the Two Bays Shoreline Management Plan.
Section 2. The need for management. 18 million pounds. Let that sink in for a second. That right there is the estimated financial damage to residential properties alone over the next 20 years if we just did nothing. If you're ever wondering why humans intervene so aggressively in coastal systems, well, an impending 18 million pound disaster is a pretty massive motivator.
To really nail this case study for your exam, we need to split the why into two distinct buckets: economic protection and environmental protection. Economically, we're talking about shielding commercial hotels, single homes worth over 10 million pounds, and a completely vital shipping channel. But environmentally, the stakes are just as high. The system is staring down a predicted 0.6-meter sea level rise over the next century due to climate change, and that threatens to completely breach the peninsula.
Let's actually dig into those economic stakes just a bit more. These residential properties aren't just your standard nice houses. They are currently the fourth most expensive properties in the entire world per square meter. It is absolute prime real estate. Plus, the beach itself is a massive tourist magnet. It's got a blue flag award for water quality, which draws serious money into the local economy. On top of that, the peninsula physically shelters Pool Harbor, making it safe for marinas and water sports. Oh, and keeping the harbor entrance clear of sediment, that's absolutely critical for commercial shipping and cross-channel ferries. The whole local economy basically hinges on this tiny strip of sand.
But you see, here is where the physical geography totally clashes with the economics. At its absolute lowest and narrowest point, specifically right at the junction of Shore Road and Banks Road, the peninsula is just 2 meters above sea level. 2 meters! And it's a mere 50 meters wide. Think about that. Without our intervention, a severe storm, paired with that predicted sea level rise, could easily punch right through that junction. It would literally cut the end of the peninsula off from the mainland, turning it into an island.
Section 3. Coastal management strategies.
So, how do we fix it? Well, we start with a foundational concept you'll definitely need to know: hard engineering. This means building physical, heavy-duty barricades, usually out of concrete or rock, to directly block wave processes. We're talking seawalls, riprap, gabions, and most importantly for sandbanks, groins. These are aggressive, highly visible structures. For example, consider the massive rock groins built out at Sandbanks. Their main job is to maintain a nice, wide, deep beach by acting like a physical wall. By sticking straight out into the sea, they trap shifting sand and absorb all that destructive wave energy before it has a chance to crash into the $10 million mansions and hotels sitting just behind the beach.
But then, on the flip side, we have soft engineering. This is a much more environmentally friendly approach. Instead of just fighting nature with a rock wall, soft engineering tries to work with the natural physical processes. Key methods here include planting vegetation to stabilize dunes, or something called beach recharge. At Sandbanks, this soft engineering actually looks pretty spectacular. They use a process called rainbowing. Imagine a massive ship offshore dredging up sand and essentially spraying it out of a giant hose directly onto the beach to build up its size. It looks like a huge arc, hence the name. It's a textbook example of beach recharge, but as you might guess, it's not exactly cheap. This rainbowing process costs about 20 pounds for every single cubic meter of sand. Although, fun fact, they've also tried just dumping the dredged sediment just offshore for only 3 pounds per cubic meter, letting the natural waves gently push it up onto the beach over time.
Section 4. Impacts on coastal processes. Now, All these strategies are designed to trigger a very intentional chain reaction. Step 1. Those massive rock groins absorb the incoming wave energy, calming the water down. Step 2. Because of those barriers, the natural movement of sand down the coastline, what we call longshore drift, is severely restricted. And we want to restrict it because stopping that sand from moving prevents it from clogging up the harbor entrance, keeping the shipping lanes open. Step 3, because we are trapping the sand and adding even more through beach recharge, the entire sediment budget ends up with a massive net gain.
Let's pause on that term real quick. The sediment budget is just the balance of sand added to versus sand removed from the coastal system. Think of it like a bank account. At Sandbanks, human intervention has completely rigged the accounting. In total, over 3.5 million cubic meters of sediment have been intentionally dumped onto the Pool Bay beaches. We are actively and heavily tipping the scales of nature. And honestly, we absolutely have to tip those scales. If we just stepped back and let nature do its thing, without the groins and the beach recharge, the natural erosion rates at Sandbanks are estimated to be roughly 1.6 meters every single year. At that speed, within a single human lifetime, this peninsula as we know it would be completely wiped off the map.
Section 5. Consequences for the landscape.
When you look at how sediment naturally transports through Pool Bay, natural longshore drift and wave action are constantly trying to sweep material away. But because of our heavy interventions, we've essentially forced the beach to build itself up exactly where we want it to. We've totally manipulated the natural stores of sediment to make sure the peninsula stands strong against the offshore currents trying to pull it apart. So, what does the final landscape actually look like after all this? Well, 4 major things. First, we now have a significantly wider and deeper beach. Second, thanks to the beach recharge, the beach has a gentle, sloping profile, which is exactly what makes it such a safe and popular spot for tourists. Third, because we blocked longshore drift with those groins, the harbor entrance stays nice and deep. And finally, we've successfully prevented a sandbar from forming across the harbor, which would have completely choked off the commercial port.
But here is the really fascinating part. When you compare the official management plan to what actually happened, it's quite a surprise. The 2 Bays Shoreline Management Plan's official goal for Sandbanks was simply to hold the line. Basically, just keep the coastline exactly where it is and don't let it retreat. But the combination of rock groins and rainbowing has been so incredibly effective that the beach is actually getting wider. It's moving seawards. So instead of just holding the line, the reality is that the coastline is actually advancing.
Which leaves us with this final, really important question to think about for your exams. Yes, human activity at Sandbanks has intentionally and very successfully changed the coastal landscape to protect billions in economic value. But is this constant, multi-million-pound cycle of pumping sand and piling up rocks a genuine, sustainable victory? Or are we just fighting an endless, impossibly expensive battle against the inevitable forces of nature and rising sea levels? Something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and best of luck mastering your geography case studies.